Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Corey Harris, editor of Security Systems News. Thank you for joining us for today's Security Insights webcast, Converged Security. How is it reshaping the modern tech stack? Sponsored by Brevo and Aquem. As physical and digital security continue to converge, the modern security tech stack is being reshaped by software driven platforms, AI powered analytics, cloud architectures, and increasingly interoperable ecosystems. During today's discussion, we'll explore why software is becoming the primary value driver and how that shift is changing the role and expectations of hardware, what integrators need to know when deploying advanced AI solutions, from real world operational considerations to performance requirements, why transparency, performance, and data governance are now critical as customers adopt more connected, data dependent systems, and what all of this means for your business, including practical steps you can take to stay ahead as the industry continues to evolve. Before we dive in, a quick note for our audience. You can submit your questions throughout the webcast, and we'll leave time at the end for our panelists to address them. Now let's meet our experts. I'll ask each of you to briefly introduce yourselves. As always, it's ladies first. Tara, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Corey, and thank you, Security Systems News, for this awesome opportunity to talk about something that Steve, Eric, and I love talking about, and that is the convergence of trends in our industry. My name is Tara Dunning. I come from Wesco, and I lead our global security and converging technology practice. Very, very excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Eric?
Yeah, Corey, thanks for having me here today. My name is Eric Uneg. I'm the Executive Vice President of Products and Services at Convergent. And as Tara said, this is a topic the three of us are really passionate about and excited to have an extended time today to talk about that. So thanks again for having us.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And Steve?
Thanks, Corey. It's great to be here with my friends Eric and Tara. We have been working on something called Megatrends for the last several years as a panel. Megatrends itself actually goes back 10 years now, and so we're looking forward to the anniversary. But to introduce myself a little bit beyond the current context, Steve Van Til, founder and president of Brevo.
Awesome, Steve. All right, well, let's get right into it. This one's for all of you, whoever wants to jump right in. We know that converged security is reshaping the industry from top to bottom. From your vantage point, what's the single biggest change you've seen in the past 12 to 18 months as physical and digital systems increasingly blend?
I'll start it off. Something that is, as Steve mentioned, we've talked a lot about on the Megatrends reports over the last several years. IT and OT convergence, if you think about security, it's part of an operational technology solutions traditionally, but it has converged with the active network. So that's where the convergence is happening. As a result, and particularly with the advent of AI since 2022, ChatGPT has been commercially available at a consumer level. And with that, we've seen a step change and advancement. Technological pace of technological change is advancing like none other in our lifetime. It's creating a lot of new industry entrants. It's creating consolidation in the industry as manufacturers, about 90% of security manufacturers are actually incorporating AI into their R&D technology. And with that comes a lot of opportunity, but also a lot of change. So for sure, the impact of AI and convergence of our solutions on active networks has had probably the biggest change from my perspective.
Well, it only took us one question to have AI become the focal point of the conversation. I think Tara's right about that. And from my perspective, what I think is different in the last 12 to 18 months, particularly from a customer back perspective, is the sense of urgency. And when all the practical things that Tara talked about with the technologies, and particularly with AI, as the world has begun to see the truly transformative potential of those technologies begin to disrupt what people previously thought were maybe undisruptible areas of society or work or all these other kind of things, there's clearly a belief from stakeholders and customer organizations that AI will obviously improve our ability to deliver security outcomes and limit risk and improve resilience and compliance and all those things. So the general sense of urgency from customers to fully understand to the best they can how to begin embracing and moving their technology systems in a different direction is palpable from the integrator's perspective on what is really different right now. This isn't just one more step function in technology changes, move in a new direction that's bringing capabilities that previously didn't exist before.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've had a lot of conversations with both integrators and end users recently about what they're doing with AI in their businesses, either as integrators or trying to work it into broader workflows inside of their company. And the thing that's really interesting about that, from my perspective, is that all these things that people are doing with agents attached to one or more security systems are really an extension of the product. And so suddenly the product isn't just this thing that the vendor created and lives on a website or lives on some other application, a mobile app. It's now much more organic, and it's infiltrating the entire organization. And so to me, that's a good sign for the industry, because it makes us part of a broader set of activities. And anytime you have that going on, the perceived value of the solution goes up. And I think that's something that the security industry has been looking for the longest time, certainly the entire time that I've been here, which is more operational relevance, more touch points with how the customers actually make money, and kind of trying to break out of that traditional security budget by showing that the infrastructure that we're putting out there, cameras, access control, identity, whatever it happens to be, is applicable to the rest of the business. And so that's really been a great trend over the last couple of years. And as Tara was saying, a lot of this came in the wake of ChatGPT bursting onto the scene, and obviously the very, very rapid pace of development since then.
Absolutely. Steve, I'll stick with you on this next one. I know, going back to your megatrends panel back at Securing New Ground, you described software growth as a, quote, invisible megatrend, projecting it could represent up to 45% of the product value chain by 2030. What does that shift actually mean for integrators who have traditionally led with hardware?
The interesting thing about that, and I think the research I did actually underestimates that number, particularly for some of the reason I was just citing with how people are attaching agents to security systems, or people are developing agentic security systems, because the value is growing there. The interesting thing about this is that it's adding more value on top of the existing stack. So you mentioned hardware and integration. I think a lot of the new value that's coming into the industry is coming in that software layer, as opposed to coming in below. Part of that's because I think we more or less perfected the lower layers. Honestly, a lot of that layer is commoditized. All cameras are kind of the same. There's some special features here and there. All control panels are kind of the same. There's some special features here and there, but all the differentiation, all the increased value shows up in the software layer, and that's what we're seeing now.
I'd like to jump in on that.
Yeah, look, I think what Steve is describing is what customers and large organizations are wrestling with right now. There's an enormous amount of hardware out there that's being run or managed or operated on, I'll say, legacy software applications, where the value and the potential in transformative use cases simply will not be realized in the future. I think what Steve's describing to me, from a customer perspective, really translates into a really unique moment for the industry and for anybody who advises, builds software, runs a customer security organization, to really step back and take a hard look at the infrastructure and the software that they've invested in, years, possibly decades, and that even though it's still technically performing the functions as originally designed, the use cases and opportunities to truly transform these environments is only going to be ushered in by platform software technologies that are ushering in the capabilities that we've been alluding to here across, an entirely new set of software capabilities.
Yeah, I would just add that the very nature of AI is it's an application, it's software, and it's making the hardware, particularly those manufacturers that are leveraging AI software, smarter. And it's a tool that not only creates value, but it creates opportunity not just for the traditional participants in the physical security industry, but others. So it's truly an exciting time to be part of the security industry. Security is a secular trend, and it's not going anywhere. And the use cases and opportunities, as Eric alluded to, for security goes well beyond threat detection, monitoring, and loss prevention. There are so many opportunities to create value with the solutions that we have in the security industry more broadly beyond traditional uses.
I'll give a comparison that might help people understand the potential that I see in this new movement. So if you look back at the development of the internet, kind of back to the late 90s, early 2000s, the companies that were really big back then were all infrastructure companies. Cisco in particular was building tons and tons of networking gear and getting everything connected, and there was a lot of fiber optic activity. And that whole layer of the internet was worth billions and billions of dollars. But if you think of all the value that's been created on top of that layer, it's 100x the value of the original hardware layer that was put in place there. And I think we could say that same kind of thing happening in security now that there's AI tools to make the most of the data, the trends, the other operational features of the systems enabled by all that hardware.
Yep. And Tara, your discussion on value leads to my next question. You must have been reading my mind. As more value moves into software and cloud platforms, how should integrators rethink the way they evaluate, package, and present solutions to customers?
Listen, the integrators are, sort of the lifeblood of the industry because they're really the glue that connects the solutions to the end user. And we've long perfected the art of safety and ensuring that not only your employees and your assets are kept safe, but that there's some level of predictability in how you deploy security systems. I think the opportunity is for the integrators to continue what they've always done well, but to really focus on the solutions that are coming into the industry and not think about it so much as AI or anything that is truly transformative, but really zeroing in on the very specific use cases. We're seeing a lot. There's stats out there that suggest that almost 90% of all global enterprises are deploying AI as part of their enterprise type solutions, or they have an AI strategy in place to develop in the next year. And of those deployable AI strategies, 70% of them are for operational efficiency. So that goes back to Steve and Eric's points about different use cases and different value that security can bring. If you look at video surveillance, which was used for intrusion, right? Intrusion and detection, the camera, it is really the ultimate sensor. And it gathers data, it can see, it can hear, and you can use that data to drive operational efficiency, whether it's compliance or safety or building optimization. Steve is very big on prop tech and smart buildings. The list goes on. Retail environment, most of the drive-throughs, everyone does self-service checkouts with the stores. That's all AI driven, and there's a camera or some aspect of security solutions involved in all of that.
Tara, I think what you're describing is reflective of what we hear with customers all the time, which is the urgency right now and this moment in time is one that I think people universally agree that the evolving technology stack is fundamentally evolving our ability to solve security problems first and foremost. So as a security integrator, job number one obviously is to deliver those, risk-oriented security outcome, use cases at a higher level with technology, that the best technology that we have available. And as part of that conversation, how might we leverage or think about the investments in that infrastructure as opportunities to, utilize that connected infrastructure and sensors, et cetera, for operational use cases. We talk about it in a pretty simplistic way a lot of the times. If we can limit a risk, or we can comply with the regulation, those are kind of the first two jobs. But if we can drive a return, 3 R's, then an R usually is some kind of operational use case that is either improving efficiency, driving safety, those kind of things that when you have a connected infrastructure, video, to your point, is the perfect case study for that, where the use cases for that on customer experience and employee experience and things on top of security and risk oriented use cases just help us rationalize different investments and time cycles for budgets on systems and technologies that will ultimately change both sides of the equation for customer environments.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay. Next up here, Eric, we'll stick with you on this next one. I know Convergent has hundreds of sellers transitioning to more software-oriented conversations. What have you learned about retraining or re-equipping teams to lead with outcomes rather than devices?
Yeah, it's a great question, Corey. And Convergent is the world's largest non-manufacturing integrator, has long been rooted in the idea of security outcomes. So I come back to this a lot in conversations like this, that we have one job, and it's to help our customers deliver security outcomes, and not making anything. As an integrator, our job is to bring the best technology, the best hardware, the best software, and the best services that ultimately deliver those outcomes. I think what's different about this moment and this season in our industry is really, it's not necessarily identifying the outcomes that's new for our selling colleagues and sort of how we go to market as an organization. It's really helping coach our stakeholders and the buyers in our organizations on how to make a business case for a very different series of investments than traditionally we've been used to doing as an industry. Our industry has very much been in a, for my entire career, almost 30 years in this business, of kind of a run to fail mindset, right? Until that card reader falls off the wall or that camera falls off the wall, the light stops blinking, you generally run those solutions until they stop working. And this is not a moment where that kind of an approach is going to meet the potential here. So thinking about this less as an incremental, keep it running kind of a budget cycle moment, and really stepping back and developing a clean point of view on what are your organizational priorities around security and risk and potentially operational use cases, and taking a really clear-eyed view of your current investments in systems and software and devices and technology, and saying what will help us get there, and do we have the right strategy? And now may be the time to begin to plan this multi-year budget cycle replacement to really move these legacy technologies out of the organization. Those old prox readers that are still working and the card is still going click, right, is probably not going to meet the moment for use cases around mobile credentials and all the things that are come with that drive a better user and customer experience in those environments. So that conversation, I think, is one that we're seeing happen a lot right now, on really helping customers spend more time to be thoughtful about building that business case, going and making a thoughtful positioning of the capital investments going to be required to really move these systems and devices into the future to capitalize on these opportunities.
Eric, it's funny that you mention some of those older systems and the run to fail model, because we're right in the middle of trying to get customers to, I'll call it, respect the end of life of one of our products that's literally 20 years old. We released this product, it's a control panel, in 2005, and it still works, which is also ironic because it was the first one that we built ourselves, and I was worried to death as the then CTO that this thing would fail after 3 years or 5 years or 7 years or something like that, and it's still running after 20. But the point of all that is nobody would dream of keeping a phone for 20 years or a computer for 20 years. And part of that is that the newer laptop, of course, is going to do a bunch of things that the old one didn't. Part of it is that thanks to the internet and all the software layers, any computer just becomes slower, even if you do nothing to it, because there's more stuff being forced down its throat. But it goes to, I guess, a branding or maybe a value question that the industry needs to address better, which is getting people to understand that that thing that's on the wall, it's not as good when it's 20 years old as the one that you can get today. And it's important to do that upgrading. It's important with respect to the readers, for example. We're beginning to see some quantum safe readers coming out right now, which is another important thing. Again, way over the heads of most people who only think about security when they move to a new office, and then as long as it works, they don't think about it. But we do need to work on that aspect as an entire industry to get people to think a little bit more proactively about this and be willing to include it in annual refresh cycles that they would for any other piece of IT.
I hope that control panel does not fail for another 20 years at least.
It probably won't.
Is that why you got promoted out of CTO, Steve? You're too good at the job. The hardware lasts too long.
I should have put in a dead man switch.
All right, Steve, we'll stick with you on this next one. Again, going back to your discussion at securing new ground, you mentioned that AI could be and I quote, a mass extinction event for software. I got a kick out of that one. Yet security has protective moats like hardware anchors and integration complexity. Where do you see AI truly disrupting the stack? And where is the hype still ahead of reality?
So the way I think about this now, and this goes back to the earlier comments about more and more the value being transferred into software, the threat or the disruption from AI is really for next year's revenue and the revenue 5 years down the road and the revenue 10 years down the road for any company that's in this business, because it can be put into that position of absorbing that extra value itself. And that's something that we then don't capture as the security industry. So more and more value gets stacked on top. Like I was saying with the internet analogy, more and more value is getting stacked in that software. And if we are not the ones providing those extra layers and people are coming in over the top, providing those functions in some other way, then we're missing out on our own future. We're missing out on the future that we created. I'll give you a very specific example because most people have encountered this in video. Customers can have, a full video infrastructure in place, and there are some new California startups that have created some video analytics software that uses AI, and that can simply attach to the APIs of any existing system and add all these additional layers. And so the original VMS vendor is missing out on all of that additional revenue that they could have had they developed those features themselves. And because these AI companies, AI native companies are more agile, they're going to be able to come in and do more of that. So I think the real attack point is not with the existing tech stack. I think everybody's right that that's pretty firmly in place. Nobody's going to displace the hardware. Integrators have to put it all together. But if you think about future value, I think that's really the piece that we need to make sure we're going to capture.
Anyone else on that?
I think the other piece, and one of my favorite parts of Steve's opening, provocative as it always is at SNG, is that it's not a mass extinction event for those who are actually leveraging the software and AI capabilities, but it's also creating a resurgence of hardware. And so if you think about where security solutions typically sit, they're on edge networks. And more sensors are being deployed, and more use cases are being deployed. And as infrastructure gets more and more robust to handle all that compute, it's opportunity. But it is not opportunity for those who aren't using the AI capabilities, which is really software driven.
Yeah, I think you hit on one of the defensive moves that the industry can make, which is running local AI models. And this is a bigger topic, of course, because all of the big platforms that are out there that many companies are using to back end their AI offerings, they're all token driven. So the more you use, the more you pay. That's not a model that really works well in the security industry, because integrators want to see a flat monthly expense from SaaS services or any other service. End users are usually contracted 3 to 5 years at a steady rate. And so when you introduce an AI service that is a variable consumption kind of service, suddenly as a provider, you don't know what your cost basis is going to be, and you've got to figure out how to price it so that either you continue to take a bet on the law of averages with some sort of flat pricing, or you take the bold move and say, you know what, our cost of goods is token based and it's variable, so our price to the customer is going to be usage based and variable, and everybody's just going to have to get used to that. I don't know which way it's going to turn out.
Stay tuned, as I say. All right. Tara, this next one's for you. As AI becomes embedded across video, access control, and sensors, what level of AI literacy do integrators realistically need to succeed?
It's an interesting question because AI has actually been around for a really long time. Generative AI, agentic AI, it's just really come into the industry since ChatGPT 3 really became available from a consumer perspective. And what I would say is everyone is using some version of AI. We all have, watches, rings, stuff in our cars, our appliances, our thermostats. So it's less about AI literacy and more about a mind shift. And I think both Eric and Steve have hit on it, that, this notion of what we've done to be successful to get us to this point in 2026, we're going to have to lean on that, but we're going to have to do some things differently. And I think part of what we need to focus on as an industry, and Eric had a terrific session at the SNG on this, is this notion of, instead of this linear value chain, it becomes more of a circle, and it's all about collaboration with the end user at the center. And when you think about the recipient of the solutions that we manufacture, that we distribute, that we integrate and support, those are becoming increasingly more complex. And the end users, just like the manufacturers, are consolidating their spend. And Steve alluded to this. No longer do we want to have all these bespoke, sort of disparate security systems and identity management systems separate from an access control, from a video monitoring, or, rather it should be all orchestrated, AV solutions, infrastructure solutions, everything should be blended. So it may be hard for an integrator who has traditionally just hung cameras and done maintenance and installation. You have to become perhaps a little bit more of a master systems integrator, or you have to partner with some people, or go to companies that provide more than just one bespoke application for security. So it's a long-winded way of saying you can't do everything, but it's really not about the AI. It's about providing a total solution that's going to solve a business problem that the customer wants.
Look, I think that's right, Tara. I think it's very analogous right now to cloud. This industry got trapped in the absolute mud on adopt cloud. Well, what does that mean? Exactly. It's saying like adopt AI. Well, what you're trying to do is paint a path towards an intelligent security future that does better at delivering risk and compliance and, all regulation outcomes that organizations need. So, from an integrator's perspective, I think it just leans into the best technology wins here. And it's why I think this moment, I'm going to go back to this moment being different, budget cycles being different, the business case being different, that if you believe that, that your security systems can be more intelligent, can deliver better value, can solve problems faster, can limit your risk, can preserve, people and properties, all those kind of things at a higher level than it did before, then you need to take a hard look at your current systems and say, are they on a path that are going to get me to that intelligent security future? I think, to me, I love AI. I love technology. People that know me know I love technology. I have all the chatbots, all the subscriptions, like all that stuff. But for us trying to help our customers actually solve problems, it doesn't do us a lot of good to talk about AI as a headline theme. It does us good to really begin to think about, what does an intelligent access control infrastructure look like, or what does an intelligent surveillance or an intelligent security function as a whole really look like in the future? And then begin to really think about, are the systems that you've invested in for an extended period of time the right systems to get you there? And this is not advocating for any particular system or technology, but now is the time to be hitting those things head on. And I think, for us, that's a really important, conversation to have, and how to get people to really to think about, where do you start making those changes, and having those, kind of hard conversations about, look, we might not be on the right platforms. We may need to be investing in new things that begin to put us on a different path long term.
I think there's, I agree with all of that, Eric. I think there's some confusion about which part of AI customers should focus on, or which part of AI integrators should focus on. And it reminds me of the early days of cloud, which I agree were kind of muddy. And what was happening then is that some providers were offering full solutions that happened to be cloud-based, but there were seminars on, how to do virtual machines over on Azure, and there were seminars on storing your video in a Amazon S3 bucket, and all these things that end users really couldn't do anything with. What they needed was a complete solution that maybe used all these different pieces, but not just being presented with the raw pieces. And I think the industry did a little bit of a disservice to customers by saying, look at this other thing, instead of saying, or having the wits about them to say, what we really need to be talking about is the complete solution. So the analog to that in the AI world today is like, should I be focusing on chatbots? Should I be looking at agents? Should I be looking at MCP servers? Should I be looking at any of those other things that are really primitives in the AI world, but don't do anything for you until you've done something with them? Their tool sets, their building blocks. And so I think it's easy to get distracted by the building blocks and not really talk about what the outcomes are, what a complete solution that uses all these wonderful tools would be like.
Oh, Steve, I think that's a really great point. Just one more thing on that. I think, I'm a huge proponent of cloud as an example, and what it does as an architecture to enable security outcomes. The fixation on the title early in kind of cloud adoption became a limiting factor. I think AI is the same thing now, where really the question a lot of times is around interoperability and the proprietary nature of current systems. Like, are your systems prepared to participate in an interoperable, automated, AI-enabled infrastructure to accept orchestration, and looking at the readiness of everything that you have is it really going to put us on a path to that intelligent security future? So, proprietary is never bad. That's not the problem. If it's siloed is the problem. So that's sort of the distinction that I often draw is, proprietary is never bad on its merits, but if it's completely siloed and unable to participate in a broader ecosystem of technologies, then there's a good chance that system is going to be a limiting factor to you to participate in whatever active AI strategies are probably already in place in these customer environments. I think it's the other major thing that we've learned in the last 6 to 12 months is, it's not like all the customers that we serve don't have AI strategies in other areas. Like, we don't have to invent that as the security integrator or the security, point of contact as the end user. You should look up and try to identify and point to the things in your organization that are already becoming AI enabled, and how do you begin to align to those kind of standards? It's much like the IT, networking conversations of the years past, that it's not our job to invent those standards. It's our job to identify, select, and deploy solutions to those standards so that we interoperate with their environments in an effective way. I think a very similar parallel is emerging right now with AI around, data governance and all those other kind of things that are there on how people adopt and implement those solutions.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to all of that, and very well said, is the security industry has done a really good job at delivering on their promise, and that is keeping people safe, et cetera. This notion of cloud versus AI or the latest quantum computing, now as well, has all been out there for a while. But if we just keep focusing on what we've done and how we've done it and how we've methodically implemented solutions, I think we're going to be fine. I would say that it's not our job to solve everything, as Eric said, but for sure, what we do know is that 90% of end users are already deploying AI, and they have an AI solution in place. And I think it really just comes back to this notion of customer centricity and deeply understanding what it is they need, what problems they're trying to solve, what challenges they have, and then really focusing on that versus a point solution or a technology. And then the rest will reveal itself, quite frankly.
I do want to remind everyone that if you do have questions for our panelists, to please submit those questions, and we'd be happy to address those at the end of the webcast. Eric, this one's for you from an integrator perspective. How are the integrators reconciling customer enthusiasm for AI with real-world constraints like false alarms, environmental variability, and ongoing tuning?
Yeah, I look, this is an everyday conversation. I think for us right now, like as you can imagine, every stakeholder in every major vertical that we serve around the globe, AI is a headline question. I mean, every time we host an event or do something, this is a topic either that is posed from the very beginning or somehow we just weigh into the themes. I think what we're reaching a point of technology capabilities where it's a technology problem now, meaning we can solve a lot of different technology problems with AI-enabled technologies, chatbots or different things that LLMs or whatever to solve problems. The real functional constraints, particularly for large organizations, is around the governance. How do you turn these things loose in your security? And it's not a technology problem. It's how do you actually enable them at scale to handle risk and compliance functions that previously people handled. This is the place where I think our industry can really begin to step into this and help our customers understand that governance and compliance is not an obstacle. It's actually an enabler for the adoption of technologies. I'm going to go back to something I said a second ago about we are not the first AI-enabled application to get adopted in our customers' environments. Okay, we're probably well down the list of things that they've already begun to adopt and work with and create governance and strategy around. It is extremely beneficial at this moment to take that step back, look up out of the security organizations and customer environments and say, where else are there active AI initiatives and what have we learned here? From a compliance perspective, from a data governance perspective, how might we take those lessons that our organization has learned, policies that we've adopted, and begin to apply them in security so that we can deploy similar technologies here? And I'll give you an example. The agent things comes up all the time. It is not a surprise to anyone that agents are going to be super effective at parsing through huge amounts of previously unstructured data, right? False alarms. You think of the access control SOCs that I've been in that have endless scrolling false alarm logs. What is real, what is not. These are great places for AI technologies and agents to do really good work. That isn't the problem. It is very relatively simplistic for us now to apply those kind of technologies in that environment. The real headwinds there are thinking about how do you now take a human out of that chair and allow an agent to do it, and how does that fit together with your risk and compliance and governance strategies for technology? Meaning, previously it was a human made every decision, and it may be flawed, and you can go to the extreme and say, a computer makes all the decisions, or is there a human in the loop in the middle? And then how might your governance need to be implemented and adopted to enable your organization's, tolerance for, allowing technology to make decisions and or process large amounts of information that previously was only done by humans. So it sounds counterintuitive in some ways to say governance is an unlock, but getting clarity on that, I will tell you right now, we've seen more pilots crash into the mountain because of the lack of confidence in sort of the governance, the liability that ultimately unfolds behind technology. It's not the technology that can't do the work. It's the organization above there and lawyers somewhere. They're going to say, ooh, I don't know about this. I'm not comfortable that we're ready to take on that risk as an organization. So I really believe that being thoughtful about the governance piece of it is really an enabler for our customers' organizations to adopt this technology at a much faster clip.
Yeah, and I'll share a funny little tidbit on that same theme, Eric. One of the things that we see are customers who themselves offer AI features, services to their customers, but their lawyers haven't gotten the memo, and they insist that none of their vendors use AI in their products.
Yeah.
Figure.
Ask the lawyers how much they use in order to come up with their arguments. I'm sure they're using AI.
Of course.
I would just say one thing that goes back to what we said in the beginning, which is IT and OT, and it's kind of the genesis and the theme of this webinar, is IT-OT convergence. And IT has been dealing with cybersecurity and network security communication at the communications level for many decades. So it's not uncommon, and it has not been uncommon to use agents and machine learning and autonomous tasks to be more predictive. And that's where the physical security is going. And it's just going to make us safer and better. I agree with the governance. I agree with everything that Steve is saying. But if you look at the comparisons of the two industries, we've done a really good job without it. And I think, it's going to make, there's only so long a guard can stare at a monitor and see everything. If you get more predictive and you make people smarter and you make functions more autonomous that make sense, it's just going to make us more efficient and effective at what we're doing.
Absolutely. Okay. Next up, Steve. How important are standardized APIs and interoperable ecosystems to bridging that barrier? And what's still missing to make cross-platform orchestration seamless?
There's a couple of interesting things there. So the whole world of APIs has gotten much better over the last 20 years since everybody started using RESTful APIs and similar kinds of documentation and data formatting standards. So way, way better than it was 20 years ago. I think this is an area where we've more or less kept pace with the rest of the software world. And so it's much easier just on the basis of those kinds of standards. Before you got to AI. Now, the interesting thing that's happening with AI is that for a lot of applications, you don't even have to know what the underlying API is doing, and that can be for one of two reasons. One, you can have your own agent that you point at the API documentation, and it goes in there and it figures out what this API does and how to do it. And from that point onward, you can ask your agent to do things, and it'll translate that into the underlying tool set that's available through the API. So that's one way. The other way is that I think more forward-leaning organizations have gone beyond the API, and they've stood up what's called an MCP server in front of it. That even cuts out the part of having your agent go do discovery and allows chatbots and things like that to connect directly to the MCP and access the underlying API and any other services they wish to offer without even that minimal degree of integration that we used to have to do. So I wouldn't call that standards because to some extent everybody's application capabilities are somewhat unique. Not everybody adds a user the same way. Not everybody manages a door or a camera the same way. So there's still some semantics at the application layer that are different from one to another, but the mechanics of connecting all these things together is pretty similar and standards driven, and I think has reached a point where I know for a fact it's easy enough for people outside of the manufacturers or vendors to do those integrations on their own and to make connections that weren't possible to make before.
I am in violent agreement with Steve on this. I say this in all sincerity. I wish every manufacturer of security hardware thought like Steve does relative to, APIs, and standardized energy. You talk about, the move to RESTful for some manufacturers and software developers is a transformative unlock for integration into all kinds of other operational use cases, IT and data infrastructure, and ultimately AI enabled use cases. As an integrator, you can almost look at that as a binary go no go evaluation of existing deployments of software. I mean, I know Steve would nod all day long about this, because if I can't connect to that in a modern RESTful way and exchange data freely and understand what's happening there and begin to expose that, it is adding value to the systems that are there, and ultimately is the gating item to participation in a broader automated orchestrated ecosystem. So it is a huge point of importance in our mind. We talk about sort of stepping back and taking stock of what you have. If your infrastructure is not built on those technologies or have a path to get there very quickly, those are going to be extreme dead ends or bottlenecks on your ability to ultimately move to that intelligent security future.
I agree completely. When Steve talked about at the S&G Megatrend, traditional software being a mass extinction event, or AI causing a mass extinction event, it's on that use of the closed systems or the traditional software. It's not necessarily the open systems, right? And I think, again, we've been talking about the pace of technological change. We've been talking about all these nuances and opportunities. If you think about the end user and the end customer, they're going to want to be able to keep pace and not having to rip and replace their solutions. So if you select the right solution that's open and can continue allow for other things to be added into the ecosystem or the network or the solutions that they're deploying, then that's just going to make everyone better. And I agree, I couldn't agree more with what Eric and Steve said. That's where the industry is going. That's what our customers want.
Awesome. Eric, we'll start with you on this one. From an integrator operations perspective, how challenging is it to stitch together multi-vendor systems when customers expect plug-and-play outcomes?
Look, this is the perfect segue from the prior conversation, and just extends what we're describing there. When you think about integration, it's not the physical integration of devices into software. This the challenge, right? It's the software layer integrations that generally are the most fundamentally problematic areas of convergence, kind of as a base theme, but then particularly as it relates to AI enablement. That if those integrations aren't there, the APIs that Steve's describing, future state kind of MCP type connections, where a standardized way and a normalized way of the rest of the world interacting with the security infrastructures that we're all responsible for maintaining and delivering, that is a fork in the road that you are putting yourself down one path or another. And I think, to me, that's where I go back to where we started this whole conversation, with the sense of urgency on what's changing this last 12 or 12 to 18 months. If I was a smaller integrator, or I'm a security practitioner, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? You are sitting in a moment right now where everybody above you and around you is expecting you to deliver an AI security infrastructure. Don't let this moment go by. The time to have the hard conversations about the systems that you've deployed, the aging technology, the end of life things that Steve talked about, that time is right. Your opportunity to make a case to build this out in a way that ultimately transforms your infrastructure over multiple budget cycles. We would all love it if you could just snap your fingers and issue a PO to rip and replace a whole. That's not practical for anybody. And so I think the real way to think about it is create a vision for where you want your security program to go. Be real clear on are the systems that you're on capable of getting you there, and if they're not, then begin to create a multi-year roadmap to make that transformation. Because you're not just going to wake up one day magically with an intelligent security infrastructure. It's going to take multiple budget cycles, and that time to start on that is right now.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Next up, Tara, I know you've compared hardware and software to the body's blood-brain barrier. Hardware producing the lifeblood data AI depends on. What does that analogy mean for system design and vendor selection?
Well, I've compared it, but I'm really good at taking great things that my partners and peers say, like Eric and Steve, and repeating it. And actually, it was Devin Love, who from Allegion, who actually talked specifically about the blood-brain barrier as an analogy to AI. And I would just, think of it like this, similar to what we said about AI being an application and therefore software. It needs a host. In this case, it needs hardware, or it needs a device, or it needs a sensor in order to operate. And I think the key is that's already been said here in terms of the analogy of what it means. It's the open APIs, it's the open architecture, it's providing full solutions, end-to-end solutions. Because at the end of the day, if you look at what the security systems integrators and the manufacturers have done, is really leverage our solutions to do more than just what they were traditionally used for. And again, the outcomes are absolutely endless. I think Steve mentioned 10x value by using AI. If you think about a traditional use case for a security, point the camera, detect an intruder, sound an alarm, versus using it to reduce your energy and maintenance costs in a building, to optimize merchandising in a retail store, to help line queuing in a big stadium or outdoor event. Those all not only drive compliance and safety, but efficiency, savings, revenue growth, innovation, you name it. And so what I would say in terms of selection of vendors or people you work with, many are already doing it, but look for companies that meet the criteria that Steve laid out for open APIs and sort of resiliency and future-proof and ability to carry an organization forward versus being bespoke. Look for companies that maybe they're not a master systems integrator, but they're already doing more than just one thing. I mean, at the end of the day, you need the supply chain assurance. You need to be able to trust that the companies, the supplier selection, the integrator selection are companies that can be reliable, they're future-proof, they have the experience. In some cases, it might be their global presence. How you would select anybody. But in this case, you really do need to think about the pace of technological change and how are you building for the future. And so I would encourage people not to think about price, but value and value creation over the long term.
Sounds good. Okay, next up. Okay, on to technology. Okay, Eric, how has convergence changed the service model, particularly around calibration, system health monitoring, and lifecycle support?
I think this dovetails into something we touched on earlier, which is this move from our industry's macro shift from run to fail to full lifecycle management. I think that is the cleanest way to think about what a security practitioner should be evolving the way that they think about their service strategy from one end to the other. And on one side you have the run to fail mindset. And look, our industry has perpetuated this for a long time. And Steve alluded to this with all of these end of life technologies that they're too good, right? They last too long. In a lot of ways, they don't fail, but they are limited in their capacity. I was speaking to a lot of our sellers recently, and I used the brick phone analogy. The old giant brick phone might still work, still making calls, but there's no chance that you wake up one day and that thing turns into an iPhone or a smartphone. Like, that's not a strategy that it's still working. Like, just because the door's still going click, or that end of life IP cameras still sending a video signal to the VMS, does not mean that it's going to be an intelligent device in an intelligent security infrastructure. So this idea of lifecycle management, I think, is an important evolution for our entire industry, in the sense that if we all expect, as we do, that AI technology will do more and more of the heavy lifting of the data and activity in our security operations centers and in these environments, then you damn sure better have a plan to maintain it, manage it, upgrade it, secure the cyber elements of it, all of the things along the way that you absolutely do for the rest of your mission critical IT technology. So the idea of moving to, total lifecycle management of security technology is a really important evolution for how people think about budgeting for, planning for, and maintaining the future state intelligent security systems that we all see coming down the path.
Okay. All right. Well, this last question is to all of you as we wrap up this conversation on converged security. If you can give integrators one actionable step to prepare for a converged, software-driven future in 2026 and beyond, what would it be?
Look, I'm going to just say know your customers flat out. There's nothing more important right now than knowing your customer deeply. I mean, from the integrator's point of view, if we don't have a good understanding of what makes our customers tick, meaning how do we help them comply with regulations, drive down risks, and what drives their economic engine, we're just like everybody else. And that at Convergent at our scale, we literally reduce ourselves down to our lowest common denominator if we don't do that well. So I think, to me, knowing your customers and what is driving their priorities right now is the single most important thing to help you create a good strategy to navigate all the technology changes coming.
I would just expand upon that. We're going to let the godfather of the mega trends close us out. I completely agree. At first, I thought you said no, say no to customers, Eric. That could have been mine, but it's knowing your customers. I completely agree with you. And I would just say, back to what got us here isn't going to get us there. So build on what you've done well, but really lean into what else they're doing beyond security, because they are purchasing solutions from others that are not security related. And our security solutions can solve for just about anything when deployed with beyond the traditional use cases, particularly using the newer solutions that companies that have been around, even though the panel still works at Breville from 20 years ago, the newer solutions can do a lot more and solve for a lot, including, going back to the quote, 70% of all AI solutions are being deployed for operational efficiency. So lots of opportunity.
Yeah, since we seem to be in this neighborhood of know your customer, I'll repeat something I've said in a few different forums, and that is, before I got into the security industry, I was in IT consulting and custom software development for financial services companies and other sorts of larger companies, call them enterprise companies. And we wouldn't lift a finger to do anything until we'd had, 6, 8, 12, 24-week consulting contract with them to deeply learn what they really needed. And Eric would know better how much of that you get a chance to do with some of these larger customers. But I think it's one of the things that contributed to the success of those kinds of IT systems, and uncovered very often why the thing that we were replacing hadn't worked out as well. And so I think if we can do that at the front end, not only will customers get a better solution, but I think we'll achieve some of that brand advancement I was talking about before, where people see these as a vital system that needs to be maintained and kept up.
Awesome. Well, obviously, I want to tell our panelists here to thank you so much for taking the time today to talk with our audience about how converged security is reshaping the modern tech stack and what it means for integrators moving forward. And thank you all for joining us today for this webcast. For those registrants who were unable to join us today, or if you would like to watch a rebroadcast of this webcast, you will get a link to view the recording at the conclusion of this webcast. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Corey.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you all.